So I think I'm going to film a disclaimer at the beginning of this video before I do any kind of discussion, any kind of reflection at all. I'm about to talk about a book that has a lot of triggering subjects within its contents, and even talking about the book can bring up some pretty triggering things. So we're going to get into conversations about anti-blackness. We're going to get into conversations about misogynoir. We're going to get into conversations about suicide and attempted suicide and suicidal ideation. We're going to talk about inherent racism, a lot of different things. And you would think all of this is in a YA book? Yes. And in this particular book, it's not in a good way, and it has absolutely no trigger warnings whatsoever within it, and I had pretty bad feelings about this even before the book was released. Today I'm going to be talking about this book, Flip by Ngozi Ukazu, who is the author of Check Please, and there's a lot we need to unpack about this book. I did not like it. That's kind of an understatement, but we're going to get into the thick of a lot of different things that need to be discussed in this book, and you'll find out in this larger video why I would not recommend this to kids or teenagers at all. Y'all, I'll be honest, reading this book put me in a depression for multiple days, like that I couldn't get out of in terms of things. It's advertised as a book that's Freaky Friday meets The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, which one of these things is not like the other.
One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell which thing is not like the other by the time I finish this song?
But the fact that, like, there's a lot of things in this book that we just need to discuss that, and I think more people will understand how offensive this is when I unpack a lot of the things that are in it that just go completely unaddressed, that are allowed to slide, things. I am shocked that more people have not called out so many instances of anti-blackness. This is by a black author. I am stunned that a woman who is talking about her autobiographical experience would write something as offensive as this and disrespectful to the black community at large for this. So we're going to talk about it. Leave it there. Hi everyone, my name is Rose, also known as TA Summers. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a book review of Flip by Ngozi Ukazu. This is the cover. This is actually a library copy that I was able to pick up, and I knew that there were very specific reasons why I chose to pick this book up. I was not originally going to pick this up. Let me be very, very clear. I was not going to pick this book up in terms of things because I saw some warning signs that this would be a terrible reading experience from the previews and some of the advertisements that were showcased before the book was even released. I'm trying to hold myself back in terms of getting upset about a lot of things in here in terms of things, and y'all will understand why I'm upset about it as we talk about some of the issues that are within this book. I'll even show you pictures of some of the panels in terms of illustrating some of the things that I'm talking about as we go through this respective video. But the Flip was released in the latter part of September, I believe, this year. I originally did apply to read it as a galley under NetGalley, got rejected, so I was like, okay, I'll just pick it up from my library and see what I can do. I had heard so many people praise this novel once it released in terms of things, and even some of the previews of it, but every preview that I have seen in terms of what the actual book contained in terms of things, including what was shared on the author's Instagram in terms of advertising the book. I may insert a clip in terms of what I mean here. between this video, but a lot of it is just steeped in a lot of like hateful things, self-identity things that are just unacceptable as far as I can like even talk about. And I think it will become more clear as I go through the narrative and talk about some of the things that this book decided to do and how it just respects its main character and the community it is portraying, and essentially like, you know, like just really doesn't do any kind of justice for either of the characters that are portrayed, either of the main characters that are portrayed in this respective Freaky Friday novel, which is supposed to be funny, but man, the jokes are terrible in this in terms of things. But we'll get into the length of all the issues with Flip through the course of this video. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. Because this book does not have any specific trigger warnings listed in the beginning or at the end of this respective book, I'm going to play a little clip of all the things that I saw while reading this book in terms of things and make note of it. So you can pause the video in between to read each of the different things that I may not have mentioned in the intro of this video, just to get a clear idea of what to expect from this respective book. So I'll pause it here. You can read it at your leisure, and then we'll come back. So first off, I want y'all to kind of understand why I had reservations of reading this book in the first place, because I got picked up a lot of red flags from the from a panel preview of this respective book from the beginning in terms of things, and I was like, I don't know if that's going to portray its respective themes with any kind of sensitivity, especially for the main character of this respective work. And I was worried about it in terms of things because the panels that I'm about to describe, and I'm also going to probably put on the screen for you to be able to see, I could hold it up with my book. Like, I don't know if you can see this specifically, but I'll put up an image for y'all to follow along as I'm looking through this. But this is the basically the series of panels that was used as a preview to advertise Flip from the beginning. And hey y'all, Editing Rose here. So I wanted to take some time to kind of talk about the panel that was introduced to me before I even picked up this novel in terms of being part of the promotional advertising for the novel before it was released. I saw so many red flags in just these 2 pages that I realized that this was not going to be a pleasant reading experience, and the fact that it kind of tells on itself in terms of the amount of misogynoir and uh, the ideation of death that's contained in this book. And there's more context that I will unpack later on in this video in terms of why this was an indicator very early on of foreshadowing some of the insensitive ways that this book talks about Chi-Chi's self-hate and self-identity hate, as well as her fantasizing about death, and not liking her body or the skin that she's in. But just to talk about this, I'm going to walk through this particular image here, starting with the first page, just reading it out. Chi-Chi's like inner dialogue says, like, who wouldn't want to be the star of a classic story, a tragic character, a war hero? And her character says, what have I done? The next panel has a bomb going off, and she's kind of trying to shield herself while the sound choom sounds off. And then the next panel has her falling to her knees in front of a dynamite box. She's accidentally knocked into that dynamite box in the next panel, which moves into the second page where a bridge explodes. And it's insinuated that in this imagined image that Chi-Chi is killed in that dream sequence. Moving on to the next panel on the second page, Chi-Chi says, also, my dad is such a sycophant to white men he thinks are successful. And her father says, my son is like my wife, very scientific. Chi-Chi here, though. And the next panel has her saying, this imprinted on me somehow. Uh, her father continues saying she has the highest grades in her English classes and she wants to be a lawyer. Chi-Chi pushes back in her inner dialogue saying, no, I don't. And this is supposed to be taking place when she's in the ninth grade, according to the note. When a little arrow that points to her says, me in the ninth grade. And then the very last panel says, uh, has her father saying, and you know I'm a professor. And she just says, no, you aren't. You're an adjunct at Houston Community College. Ugh. So let's unpack the problems in these two pages, which rubbed me the wrong way. The very first thing that I noticed here was the anti-blackness and misogynoir in terms of Chi-Chi's fantasizing about death. And if you are not from the black community, this kind of thing in terms of this kind of imagery and fantasization of a black woman or a black girl dying heroically in some form or fashion is a misogynoir. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard these stereotype in terms of like people saying crudely that the only good black woman is a dead black woman, and the fact that this has Chi-Chi fantasizing heroically about death and she's only a child. I'm like, I am not okay with that. I am not okay with that at all. And then the other piece of that, which a lot of people probably won't point out unless you know something about academia, the way that Chi-Chi talks about her father's profession, most people, if you are outside of academia, you don't know the difference between an adjunct professor and a professor. It's just a professor in most people's minds. It has to do with like certain terms and things that the person in that profession works towards. But the fact that comment is put through Chi-Chi's mouth as a 14-year-old girl in terms of things feels like a very classist statement, and it's weird, and I don't understand the decision that was made to include that in Chi-Chi's dialogue. I can understand her ribbing her father about trying to put on like her choice like for her future because she said she doesn't want to be a lawyer, but it's not humor to hear her say that about her father's profession in terms of things. It feels like a very adult joke in a YA novel, and it's not even a joke. It just feels like a passive aggressive pointed statement, which is very, very weird. I wasn't okay with it when I saw it in the preview, but these two pages being the first two pages to advertise the novel did not put a good impression with on me at all in terms of things, but I decided to read the novel anyway. And you'll hear the reasons why in the next part of this video. So, ending here. Yeah, like it just feels it definitely when I saw this I was like, I don't think this is going to go over well, and I don't think the jokes are going to land as well as it thinks. And then to see the showcase the other part of this where I was like, okay, I don't think this is going to be a very funny like thing to cheer on, because when I saw the author post on her Instagram stories this reel of where Chi-Chi is inside the body of her crush, that is kind of like the premise of this respective book, turning down his love interest in his body and the look of heartbreak that is on her face. I was like, why are people cheering that on? That is so vile and disrespectful and crossing of boundaries in terms of things. Why are people cheering that on? It doesn't make sense to me, but I was like, okay, I have not read this story. I don't know what the sequence of events are. I don't know what precludes it or follows it. So I probably should read this book for myself and get the whole picture before I judge it. So that's what led me to read this book in its entirety. Having read all of it in its entirety and seeing everything that's good, I wish I had my time back. I wish I haven't. I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all what my rating for this book is. If you have read my review on Goodreads and on my blog, you already know what I'm going to say. I give this book formally 1 star, but if it was up to me, it would be 0 out of 5 stars. It was not worth reading. It was not worth reading, and I don't think this book deserves to be put in the same name line as its inspiration, The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, because Toni Morrison was so much more respectful of tackling some of these similar themes in The Bluest Eye than Ukazu was in this book. We're going to go through it in detail, step by step, in terms of what this book does, why it was so offensive and anti-black and steeped in misogyny, or why I would not give this to kid and teen. Like, I'm not saying that kids or teens can't read it. If there is a kid or teen who is interested in reading this, I would not block them because I don't believe in a book banning or not permitting a child to read a book they really want to read. But this book is not the lighthearted story that it thinks that it is. It's not even a romance. It is not a romance. Do not go into this thinking that it is a romance. It is far from being a romance in terms of things. I don't think this book knew what it wanted to be in terms of things, and that's part of the reason why it failed so hard on the landing in terms of it. Like, you don't know whether or not this wants to be a romance or if it wants to be a coming to terms of self, being able to love yourself in terms of who you are. It really just does not stick the landing on any of those things, and kind of just marches to a conclusion that's happy but doesn't deal with any of the serious topics that it brings up in terms of things, and if anything, it glosses over them very heavily to the point where there's no satisfying conclusion to be had with what it chooses to raise. So we're going to get into this, dig in as much as possible in terms of things. I feel like a lot of people kind of glossed over a lot of things in this in terms of how it really just did not stick the landing for anything that it tried to do. So let me give you a brief summary of what Flip is about by Ngozi Ukazu. Flip is about a black girl named Chi-Chi who is in love with one of the white boys at her high school, her preparatory academy, named Flip. And she's had a crush on him for the longest time. She talks about crushing on like the white boys from her school in terms of things. And Flip is like the number one in her mind. And she essentially has this plan of hers to try to ask him out for the festival, which is kind of like a prom thing that her preparatory school holds. And that proposal goes horribly wrong in a way that she did not want it to be public. She did not want it to be put on blast or anything like that. She just wanted to ask him in terms of things. Of course, he turns her down, is interested in somebody else. This messes with Chi-Chi, in terms of things, and Chi-Chi is obviously a girl who has very, very low self-esteem, does not love herself, has a chat bot that she talks to where she says all kinds of negative things about her self in terms of things, and we'll get into the details of how that's problematic later. But for the overview, she one rainy night, she's kind of lamenting how the proposal went completely wrong. She accidentally trips and falls, hits her head, and injures herself and stuff like that. She doesn't feel right. She goes back to her dormitory with her friends, and her friends are worried because she missed their dinner thing, and she said she's going to go to bed. When she wakes up in the body of Flip, and Flip wakes up in her body. And there's controversy, like, and that's the Freaky Friday part of it in terms of things. So they have to navigate trying to figure out each other's lives, essentially, like, trying to figure out how to navigate this flipping thing, whether they can end it or not, and also navigate in terms of how they feel about each other's lives, and in terms of, like, seeing through each other's eyes in terms of what their life is like, and ultimately coming to terms with what caused them to flip in the first place. So that is a general summary of everything that happens in Flip. But oh boy, when you get into the details of everything, it is not as funny or original, self-affirming as you would think. And I know the author had said that this is about as close to an autobiographical account as she could get. I did get some pieces of autobiography in terms of some of the things that are portrayed in this, but and some of the slice of life details in terms of, you know, Chi-Chi and Flip, like, navigating their school life and navigating their home life is probably were the best parts of the book, but they were not enough to save everything else that happens in this book in terms of things and what ended up not being addressed. There was just so many things that were just glossed over that should have been addressed, that should have been talked about with seriousness and dignity for the characters, but they were not even touched upon, and just kind of glossed over and just say, oh, this is fine. Like, we're not going to talk about this. This is fine. Happy ending. La, la, la. No, we'll talk about it though.